Hi, I'm Vernon, and
I'm Kit.
we're here with a new review for First Man.
Okay.
In case you've been wondering, it's about Neil Armstrong. His plot spoilers: he does land on the moon. But in between being introduced to Neil Armstrong and him landing on the moon about 2 hours into the movie, what on earth did we just watch?
We watched Neil Armstrong going through the whole space program from when he was recruited. It started with him as a test pilot, almost.
With the Air Force.
Yeah, almost crashing, I guess. And so I think what we saw was mainly vignettes, little slices of life of his entire journey until he landed on the moon. I think that was the way the movie was told.
I agree with Kit. I look at it in a larger perspective. We experience the America's successful moon landing mission through the eyes of Neil Armstrong. That is true. However, there are two main stories that are told in this film. One is roughly about Neil Armstrong's personal struggles with the loss of his child very early on in the film. The second is him and the space program trying to live through all the mishaps, accidents, and disasters along the way.
I don't think the daughter part was a major portion of the movie. It was just.
But it got to a point where Neil Armstrong would see the hallucinations of his daughter
But in terms
everywhere.
in terms of screen time, that's only a few minutes, and I didn't think it had a major impact on the
Storytelling wise, it does.
movie. I think it was a bit like Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, where they put in this kind of prophecy about him and his son dying or something, and I thought it was just like didn't really work. It's a bit tacked on.
It does feel very tacked on, because if you take away that so-called Neil Armstrong's personal struggles movie, this movie would have been a lot tighter, a lot less melodramatic, a lot less Hallmark movie-ish.
The struggles you're talking about, the daughter or other struggles? Because already I think the daughter was only a few
Obviously,
minutes.
his struggle as a survivor of his daughter's death. He's haunted by her. He clams cannot talk about his daughter to his wife, his children, his neighbors, his colleagues.
I just thought that was a reflection of his personality.
It could be, but it makes dramatic sense. Although it makes too much dramatic sense for me.
Okay, at the credits, it says that the movie was based on a book, and I'm assuming that the book is quite factual. From what the little bits I know about the moon program, the major parts were correct. The thing is, of course, conversations are recreated or imagined, and I don't know whether they got quotes from his wife or even from him. Because even though Neil Armstrong is no longer with us, I don't know when the book was written. He could have, but then my impression is that Neil Armstrong has actually kept a very low profile compared, especially to Buzz Aldrin,
Who is very appropriately portrayed in this movie as a really big mouth, loud mouth rather.
They seemed a bit mean towards him. I don't know whether it was really like
Yeah,
that.
he's almost portrayed as this guy with no EQ whatsoever and just speaks whatever is on his mind at the most inappropriate situations and occasions.
A few decades ago, I actually read Michael Collins' memoirs on it. It's called Carrying the Fire. And Michael Collins actually has only a few minutes in this movie. There's very little of him. There's very little of Buzz Aldrin also. But
In fact, this movie is almost all about Neil Armstrong and the cast of supporting actors around, supporting crew around him.
so my impression of Neil Armstrong in real life, from what little I've read about him, is that actually he's a very quiet guy. He didn't really talk much about uh, Apollo 11 or anything. I don't think he wrote a memoir about it. So I think the movie at least tried to get around this by bring dramatizing certain, but
It dramatizes in a very generic fashion,
I-
which kind of works slightly to the detriment of the movie
I-
when it's not focused on the moon mission itself.
I think it works because Ryan Gosling seems to be playing this kind of like strong silent type, this cliched
Basically,
old,
every
Hollywood.
every Ryan Gosling character he's ever played before, he's playing now again
But
as
it-
Neil Armstrong.
So it kind of works. They do a lot of close-ups on him, and he's just quiet. He's just like moody,
Intense, brooding.
but there's enough happening around him that
Thankfully, we are not stuck with him.
that you can read what you want into his expression, and I think that's
The
effective.
drama actually revolves around him.
Yeah.
He is the anti-dramatic character. Sort of.
It kind of works, because he's like really shut in a bit, trying not to respond, but he's not totally blank, so it works.
It also helps that most of this movie is shot in extreme close-ups and tight angles, so you don't actually get to get this perspective that space and environment would give context to in terms of drama.
Visually, it works. The close-ups work. It looks great.
It looks great,
But-
but it has a very claustrophobic feeling, which is highly appropriate for the moon mission segments
I
and the
did-
training segments, but I don't really know if it truly worked
It worked for
in
me.
the domestic drama segments.
This was an interesting thing, in the when they were in Gemini 8, the Gemini 8 capsule. It was like mainly from his point of view. They didn't show the outside of. They did not show the rocket launch. Everything. So it was like really his point of view.
Yeah.
And-
So there's a lot of noise in that sequence, a lot of static over the radio, and you can't actually tell what is malfunctioning. All you see are various meters on his
Oh.
spaceship console going haywire, and that's about as much drama and as much cinematic
No,
perspective
I loved
as
it.
you can
I
get.
thought that was a very effective sequence. But actually, I was talking about earlier during the launch, because the obvious thing to do would be to show the rocket, right? Wow, it's dramatic. But yeah, they just had it from his point of view from within the capsule, and I thought it was effective. And I was
I-
actually surprised for the Apollo 11 launch. They actually showed the rocket from the outside, which was it's an interesting thing, because you wonder, so why did they show the rocket, the external of the rocket for Apollo 11, but not for Gemini 8? But I think it worked.
It only worked because for once you get a sense of scale. In fact, this movie for me visually has very little sense of scale, except for when he touches down on the moon, then you see the scale, or when the movie zooms out to a mid-range shot, you see the scale in the domestic drama. Otherwise, it's quite a lot of really narrow shots, close-ups, narrow angles, and basically for more than 2/3 of the film, you will be watching someone's face take up more than 3/4 of the screen.
But I think it was okay because really, Ryan Gosling was like emoting, you know, and
You mean
to
emoting in a
drama.
broody, anti-dramatic way?
So it's like, yeah, you're trying to figure out. So what is he really thinking? You know, so there's something going on behind his eyes. So
It's called the
so,
Marlon Brando School of Acting. Mumble and brood, mumble and brood.
I'm not a Brando fan, but yeah.
There
Anyway.
you go.
No, but Gosling, he gets he gets it. I mean, he makes it work. It's like the Terminatrix in Terminator 4, I think, right? She's supposed to be a robot, so she's supposed to be expressionless, but actually she's not. There's actually a slight little expression there that that makes you enables you to know what she's thinking. So I think Gosling had the same thing going on here.
I think the character that actually, for me, made the film work was Claire Foy. Claire
Oh yeah,
Foy.
yeah, she was good. She was amazing. I thought she was
Because she has such a diametrically opposed style of acting compared to Ryan Gosling. She's, of course, acting as Neil Armstrong's wife. There's this. If Neil Armstrong is this rock that remains steady throughout, steady and silent, and yet seething a little throughout the whole of the film, Claire Foy's character is this. Claire Foy's character has a roller coaster of emotions that you can actually identify and sit through.
especially towards the end when she's angry or upset or worried. It looks very real. It doesn't look overdone. It's not like acting. It just feels very real. You just pulled into her. So yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I think the movie actually works because of her, or rather, the domestic drama works because of her.
I think it was the writing also, the way they chose the scenes, the lines. They just, because they have a lot of ground to cover, and
They gave Claire Foy the best lines in this film.
and I think both the domestic drama and the technical stuff about the space program, they just had very good judgment in terms of what they chose to show and how they showed it. So I really feel this is a very good show don't tell movie.
Yeah. For me, what I really like about the movie is the rather novel to me way that it brings the domestic drama and the mission control mission drama together. And I think the common theme is basically sort of very Roman Empire-esque. Sort of the Roman Empire got really big because they got incrementally better at what they were doing.
Oh, okay. So I saw it as they really explained without being too expository about how they actually had different phases in the space program, and so they built up the experience to finally land Armstrong on the moon. You could really understand it, what they were doing. I thought that was great.
Yeah, it helps that there's this classic intro sequence where a guy starts drawing figures on a chalkboard.
Huh?
Yeah, that and to basically explain what they were doing with the moon mission and
No,
its development.
There were only like one or two, and it was made to show the scale. Okay. Oh yeah, you were talking about scale. Okay. I think what the movie didn't get across to most audiences is that the scale, how far away the moon was. It took them 3 days to get there, but they kind of mentioned it. They said it's like an 8-day mission, but the sense of distance and time wasn't there. But this is a minor
Yeah,
gripe.
the sense of distance and time is all compressed into those close-up narrow angle shots you have of the various faces of the astronauts.
Because it's such a big story, they have to choose what they're going to emphasize, how they're going to approach this story, and yeah, they threw all that out. They knew what direction they wanted to take, and they stuck to it. I think it's a very admirable piece of movie making.
It's admirable, but not the best looking form of movie making. I did not really see the need to watch this in the cinema. I would have been just as content watching this on TV on a much smaller screen.
No, I liked it in the cinema, but the thing is, I'm actually short-sighted, so when I watch Netflix on my phone, my phone is here, so it looks widescreen to me.
Would you watch it again?
Oh yes, in a heartbeat. I love this movie.
I would watch it again, but on TV as a rerun.
Why?
Like I said, it lacks the sense of cinematography. And this being exec produced by what's his name?
Can't remember. There was a familiar name there, but I can't remember.
Yeah, the
Spielberg?
ET guy, right?
Spielberg.
Yes, that ET guy. No, it being exec produced by him, this is actually a disappointment in terms of visuals.
No, I
In
loved the
terms of
visuals.
cinematography.
No, I liked it. I thought the sets also great. You really felt that you were back in the 1960s.
I mean, the film stock also helped, I think.
Stop.
Film stock.
Oh, do you use film?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. I would say fix it in post, but yeah, a lot of people like film. I don't get it.
But it's just got that graininess.
You can add it theoretically. You can add in it.
Yeah, it's got that graininess. It's different types of stock have that different color quality, the different way
LUT.
light is.
LUT. Theoretically, you can adjust it, but who am I to argue with the Dark Knight guy? Well, what's his name?
Christopher Nolan?
Yeah, he loves film, so okay.
Yeah.
And Tarantino also loves film, but I don't see it. But.
It's easier to film in film rather than to
No.
recreate painstakingly
no.
the feel of film during post.
I disagree, but yeah,
There
I
are
don't know for
filters,
sure.
of course.
I don't
There
know
are
for sure.
filters.
I don't know for sure.
I'd say interesting storytelling may not work for a lot of people. When it works brilliantly.
I think the general public will not like it because it really felt like a show don't tell kind of movie.
It felt like Showtime doing a docudrama
It felt
of the
like
moon landing.
it felt like lost in translation. I loved it. Most of the movie buffs that I know, they love it, but the non-movie buffs that I know, a lot of them say, but nothing happened. So you can't really say nothing happened in this movie. Come on, it's a space program, but
there's a
it had the
space
same. It had the same feel. They just showed you. Okay, lost in translation. For me, it showed two people falling in love. It showed the details, how they went, how they fell in love. This one, I feel, showed how Neil Armstrong went through the space program, what made him such a good pilot or astronaut. They actually didn't. He was part of the vignettes. They actually showed how good he was, but without getting overly technical. But he was like, whoa, yeah, this guy is good, and I know why.
This film is very understated, maybe a little too understated.
Yeah, that's part of the show don't tell kind of vibe. So yeah, it would be interesting to ask some of my non-movie buff friends how they found this.
Yeah. So for Kid, it's a thumbs up. For me,
Definitely.
it's like sideways.
Anything else you want to talk about? I've got some details, but so I think they use the LED displays, the 7-segment LED displays for the numbers. I doubt they actually used that in the 60s. This looks really like digital LEDs, but this is like a really kind of very technical gripe. But the rest of it, from what I know of the space program, is accurate. They didn't make stuff up. The thing about Neil Armstrong almost dying on Gemini 8 because it spun out of control. I remember vaguely hearing something like that, but I didn't know the details, so I loved seeing it in detail in this movie.
Yeah, that's a problem with this movie, because after watching the disaster happen, and then there's this major inquiry that occurs because this is a government program and things need to be accounted for when things go wrong. At the end of the inquiry, no one is any wiser about what happened.
No, they did. They explained it.
Yes, explained it. You survived. You're good enough.
No,
You couldn't have done anything really wrong.
No, they actually went through like the different steps that he went. He detached from the Gina. Then,
Yes, but
then he
Kira
then-
Rines at the end tells him, well, this is going to be short.
But he also did give specific engineering input. He's saying that if you could give us the ability to turn off the thrusters one by one or something.
If you could give us the ability to monitor the thrusters
Yeah.
one by one,
So
we could have found out what exactly went wrong.
So I thought that was great. I mean, they took up like just 1-2 minutes of screen time, but it really showed you how technical it was and how important the astronauts were. They're not just passengers.
They were not over glorified pilots, but they actually were top engineers.
So and especially it showed how good Neil Armstrong was. So yeah, I thought it worked.
Well, it showed how good Neil Armstrong was, but it also showed how a lot of things could actually boil down to luck as well.
Okay, one thing that did come across was the sense of danger. Even though, of course, you knew that they succeeded and he lives to a ripe old age, the sense of peril was there because they started with him almost his aircraft, the X-15, almost going out of control. He was a test pilot. There was a test plane, a rocket plane, not a jet plane. And also about his Apollo 1, the 3 astronauts who died. And I remembered that. So when it was approaching the scene, I was like, biting my fingernails. I knew these guys were gonna die. It just felt so ominous and scary.
Yeah, because the viewer, are being trapped in the same tiny little spacecraft as them.
But they didn't telegraph it. That was great. If you didn't know about the fire beforehand, you would just say, oh, okay, just showing this, and then bam, you would have been a shock to most people, I think. And also, and they also had this thing about 2 of the astronauts dying in an airplane crash before that. So yeah, the sense of danger was there, and I think that added a lot to them. Yeah, that's it. Yep, I think we're done.